Honestly, this method and treatment not only changed my drinking, but just changed my life. And so basically what the protocol is, it's a really powerful biohack, if you will, to overcome excessive drinking habits and really become more of a moderate drinker or be able to quit drinking if that's your goal. The method works by using a generic medicine that is called naltrexone that is taken 1 hour before drinking alcohol.
Welcome to Hack to Health, where we uncover biohacks to help you live younger, longer. I'm Joe Steele, and today we're diving into a powerful brain hack to master cravings, whether it's alcohol, sugar, or screens, using a neuroscience-based approach. Our guest, Katie Lain, founder of Thrive Alcohol Recovery, went from nightly wine to barely drinking by rewiring her brain's reward system with a science-backed method. Now, she helps thousands take back control. Get ready for brain-based tools to transform your habits and reclaim your vitality. Hey, Katie, thanks so much for taking the time to join me today.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me, Joe.
There's a lot of people, adults, social drinkers, they don't know it could be dulling their mental edge. I was wondering if we could start with the Sinclair method, what the Sinclair method is and how it sort of helped you and sparked what you're doing.
Yeah, and you said you weren't familiar with the method. To be honest, most people aren't, even though it's been around since the 90s and been researched since then. I remember when I first learned about it in 2017, I was like, there's no way this is a thing. Like, this just seems too good to be true. But, surprise, it's not too good to be true. And honestly, this method and treatment not only changed my drinking, but just changed my life. And so basically what the protocol is, and by the way, I was recently reading a stat from the CDC, and it said that 1 in 3 Americans drinks excessively. So there's a lot of people in this, I guess you could call gray area drinking or alcohol use disorder, who are just drinking too much, but they don't realize that a method like this exists that can help you cut back on your drinking. So it's named after the researcher who discovered it back in the 90s, Dr. David Sinclair. It's called the Sinclair method. And it's a really simple protocol, and what it does basically is it's a really powerful biohack, if you will, to overcome excessive drinking habits and really become more of a moderate drinker or be able to quit drinking if that's your goal. The method works by using a generic medicine that is called naltrexone that is taken 1 hour before drinking alcohol. So this treatment, it's not an abstinence-based treatment. It's started while somebody is still drinking, and it's designed to help them drink less. And it does that by taking this medicine that is, by the way, is generic, so it's very cheap. It's non-addictive. It's been researched for over 40 years. It's just like a really effective medicine that's kind of flown under the radar, I think, because it's generic and there's no like pharmaceutical company out there making a bunch of money and marketing it. But this medicine is taken before drinking. And what it does is it sits on receptors in your brain that would otherwise be getting a huge flood of endorphins when you drink. That's essentially why alcohol can be addictive for almost anybody, or habit forming, whatever word you want to use, because it just feels so good for the brain. And when we do that on occasion and in moderation, it's not a big deal. You probably won't get addicted to alcohol, but the issue comes in when we do it repeatedly and the brain is getting that flood of pleasure over and over again. The brain adapts, and that's where we lose control. We're craving it. We can't stop at just a couple. So this medicine is taken before drinking, and what happens when it sits on these receptors, it kind of mutes some of the reward from alcohol. It doesn't make you sick. It doesn't make it an unpleasurable experience to drink. It just makes it slightly less interesting, slightly less euphoric, less rewarding. And over time, with repetition of doing this protocol, the brain essentially unlearns the alcohol use disorder because it's doing the behavior and it's not getting the same level of reward anymore. And when that happens, a lot of people, kind of the 3 common signs I see that someone is, having success with the protocol is typically by the end of the treatment, they're not really craving alcohol anymore or thinking about it anymore. They might still be drinking, but it's like, hey, I'm going out to dinner on Friday. It's an Italian restaurant. I'll have a glass of wine there. It's not like this, oh my gosh, it's 5 o'clock. I need that bottle of wine. So they're not really craving alcohol anymore. If and when they're drinking, they have control. They have an off switch. They can stop after a couple drinks. And most people are spending most of their time or all their time alcohol free. The choice is up to the individual if they want to keep drinking with this protocol or or quit drinking. So that's kind of like the 101 of it, what the Sinclair method is and how it works to help the brain essentially unlearn alcohol use disorder. And the one final thing I'll say is part of David Sinclair's research when he discovered this treatment is he really demonstrated that, alcohol addiction or alcohol use disorder is more of a learned behavior. It's not like this allergy or this disease or just who you are as a person, you're just an addict. It's not that. It's just by repeatedly drinking and doing so to excess, you can learn an alcohol use disorder. And with this treatment, it can be unlearned.
And how did this relate to you? You had a personal experience with this, correct?
Oh, yeah. Yes. So I personally struggled with my drinking for nearly 10 years, basically the entire decade of my 20s. And what started as something that I thought, when I was about 20, 21, I started drinking a lot. And I was like, this is something that people my age are supposed to do. Like, it's fun. We're going to bars, getting drunk, doing crazy things, whatever. I saw it as like a phase that I would do this for a few years and then I'll kind of rein it in and, take life more seriously, basically. But for me, what I found is after a few years of drinking in that way, I had learned an alcohol use disorder. And it runs in my family, so I think I had a genetic predisposition to it. I was more prone to this, developing it. But I was honestly naive to how addictive alcohol was. And I think a lot of people, because it's so socially acceptable and normalized, like, it's not really, I think there needs to be more. For me, I wish I would have understand more clearly how addictive alcohol could be. That just by repeatedly drinking, I was training my brain to get addicted to alcohol. So long story short, I became addicted, and for years I tried to either moderate my drinking, set rules around it, keep it for the weekends, or I'm just going to have 2 drinks tonight, or I'm going to do dry January and that's going to reset my habits and I'll be back to normal again. Kind of all these attempts to either moderate or quit my drinking. And what I found is that it was very hard to do. I failed at moderate drinking most of the time. Even if I would set out to do dry January, I'd make it like 4 days and drink. And I really, really struggled. And it seemed like the harder I tried to quit or control my alcohol, the worse my drinking became. And definitely experiencing some negative consequences from my drinking. I was drinking and driving a lot. I got pulled over once when I should have been given a DUI, and for some reason the cop let me go. Was having some health risks, winding up in some dangerous situations, and kind of always thinking about, okay, like we hear about this rock bottom. When's that rock bottom gonna come? It just keeps getting lower and lower, if you will, and it hasn't motivated me to kind of quit. But I kept kind of looking for ways to overcome this. I couldn't figure it out, but I kept researching, and I stumbled on the Sinclair method by accident through a TEDx talk that's still on YouTube called How I Overcame Alcoholism by Claudia Christian. And she talked about her experience with this method and how it changed her life. And I was blown away when I learned about it. I was like, this seems too good to be true. Like, I don't have to quit drinking. I can drink if I want to, but I can drink less. Like, what? And this is a brain issue? What? I've never heard that before. But started on the treatment in July of 2017. And within a month, I was like, this is changing my life. I can already tell. I was still drinking a lot in the beginning because I was a daily heavy drinker. But as I progressed through the treatment, I just drank less, thought about alcohol less, had more alcohol-free days, and got to a place where I could really take it or leave it. Like, sure, I'll have a drink, but I'm not upset if I'm not drinking. And when I do drink, I can have a couple and not feel the need to keep drinking more.
So when people, you mentioned endorphin release, I'm assuming. What's the science behind that? Because I think that's a term that people are familiar with. Endorphins are releasing, dopamine hits. What exactly is the science behind the alcohol and what that's doing in our bodies?
Yeah, and this is something that's really simple, I think, to understand, but a lot of people don't really think about it in that way. I know I certainly didn't. That the reason that alcohol is addictive and the reason that people become addicted to it, whether it's a mild addiction or moderate or even severe, is simply because when we consume alcohol, it floods our brain with feel-good hormones, including endorphins. We get dopamine, and there's this like cascade effect where we drink, like, I remember the first time I drank wine, I was like, this is disgusting. Why do people drink it? But as I repeatedly drank it and got that huge reward from the alcohol, I learned to love wine to where I would like salivate at the thought of a glass of red wine. And so for people to realize that, I really believe, that when we become addicted to alcohol, it doesn't need to be our identity. And I know that that helps some people. Oh, I'm an alcoholic or I'm an addict. But that's not really what's going on, because that's kind of putting this like character, if you will, on yourself, or this identity on yourself, when really what's going on is your brain has just been getting all this feel-good pleasure from the alcohol. And when you chronically give your brain all of that pleasure from the alcohol or other addictive substances, your brain's always wanting to adapt and get back to homeostasis. So repeatedly drinking to excess and getting all that superficial reward changes the brain, because your brain wants to adapt. It's like, okay, if I'm getting all this superficial reward from alcohol, well, I don't need to produce as much dopamine and endorphins on my own naturally, because we produce these things naturally. And so when we're not producing as much of that feel-good hormone naturally, because we're getting it all from alcohol, that's where we start to crave the alcohol and look for it, because your brain thinks it needs it for survival, and kind of like the simplest way to describe it, because it's impacting the same reward center in the brain that is responsible for our survival, the reason we seek out food and connection and sexual relations and things like that, because we need these things to survive. That same reward center is impacted by the alcohol. And so on some level, when we develop an alcohol use disorder, again, it's developed over time by repetition of drinking to excess. You're giving your brain all this pleasure on a regular basis. The brain changes, and then it thinks it needs this substance to survive, and so it craves it. It looks for it. And that's why a lot of people, if they're not drinking, if they're in some form of alcohol use disorder, they'll say, I don't feel like myself unless I've had a couple of drinks, because your brain is literally changed, and it's thinking, okay, I need this substance as like a daily or a regular thing just to feel normal, just to get that level of pleasure in the brain.
And when people say, okay, it's a brain-based issue, what about the reverse? What do you say to people that say, this is just willpower and you're not strong enough just to turn it down? Like, how, it's just, there's proof that we're training our brains otherwise, correct?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And for me personally, willpower was the thing I turned to for years to try to fix this issue. Okay, if I try harder, if I'm harder on myself, if I'm angry with myself when I drink too much, if I set more rules and just try harder, then this will go away. Because that was like the only method I really knew, the white knuckling, okay, just don't drink today. And it's, again, because the part of the brain that's impacted with the addiction, it's the survival part. It's kind of like saying, I'm not going to drink water anymore. After you've had a big glass of water, no problem. You're not thirsty. Okay, sure. We can delude ourselves into thinking we're not going to need water. But in a day or 2 days or 3 days, you're going to be really craving some water, to where you might do some insane things to get water. You might hurt someone. You might hurt yourself. You might do something because you're needing it for that. It's like that survival urge is pushing you to get it. And so when we have an addiction, once the brain has changed, the addictions become hardwired into the brain. And so for a lot of people who are addicted, it no longer feels like a choice. It maybe started as a choice, but when the brain changes, we're equating it again to a survival need. So it's not a conscious decision of, should I drink today? Should I not drink today? It becomes more of like this compulsion, to where we're on some level mistakenly equating alcohol to a survival need. So, we can try to approach it logically with willpower or more rules or discipline. And for some people that works for a period of time. But if you look at the statistics for the relapse rate with traditional treatment models, which don't address the brain, it's just more about quit, call yourself an alcoholic and don't drink again. Those methods help some people, but if you look at the data, it's estimated that 80% or more end up relapsing within 6 months of leaving treatment. So it's failing the majority of people, and I believe it's because it's not dealing with the brain issue. Just because you quit drinking doesn't mean the brain is no longer addicted. In fact, it's still addicted, and part of David Sinclair's research was a phenomenon known as the alcohol deprivation effect. This is something that's been researched. You can look it up online. Really, what it showed is that, okay, so you've become addicted to alcohol, the brain has changed, and it now thinks it needs alcohol for its survival on some unconscious level. When we quit drinking, because the brain isn't getting that reward that it thinks it needs for survival, it becomes deprived of it. Just like if we say we're not going to drink water, we get deprived of it. And so what ends up happening is the craving increases, the motivation to get a drink increases. And so that leads a lot of people back to drinking again. And I think people listening to this, we probably all know at least one person who's been in and out of rehab or struggled with alcohol or tried to quit and they can't. It's not because they're not trying hard. It's not because they don't want it. It's not because they're a terrible person. It's because their brain has fundamentally changed and thinks they need this substance for survival. And that's why we will throw away jobs, relationships, money, family to keep on drinking. It's not a logical issue. It's more of a primitive, almost survival urge when it gets to that point. And that's where the Sinclair method is so effective, because it helps to undo all of that, to reverse all of this in the brain and put the brain back to the place it was in before somebody ever developed an addiction to alcohol.
So when someone comes to you or is discovering this for the first time, we also hear a lot, okay, you're an addictive person, you're an addictive type of personality. Maybe you get addicted to whatever it is, overeating or whatever negative trait someone might call. How much of this do you think, when critics might say you're an addictive personality versus you trained your brain to learn this? Is there a line between, or do you believe that? Do you believe addicted people will pick up this habit of drinking and that's why they become addicted to the alcohol? Or do you think it's more so people are learning the behavior and training their brain to become reliant on it?
You hear people say, oh, I have addictive personality. And, I haven't dug into the research on this, if there has been research on it. But personally, I don't really find that to be a true thing. And what I saw in my own life and what I've seen with a lot of people I work with is most of the time they're very disciplined. They're very successful. They'll go to the gym, they'll try to eat healthy and have a lot of structure in their life. Yet the alcohol is like the thorn in their side. I love this quote I heard from Andrew Huberman one time that I think just so accurately describes what's happening when we develop an addiction. He says that an addiction is the gradual narrowing of the things that bring you pleasure. So again, I'll say it, an addiction is a gradual narrowing of the things that bring you pleasure. And so, I can think back to like when I was a teenager before I started drinking. I had a lot of things in life that brought me pleasure. I had friends, I had social activities, sports, movies, food. Like there was no one thing I was constantly turning to enjoy myself. There was a menu of options. But when we develop an addiction to anything, whether it's alcohol or scrolling on social media or sugar or whatever, we've essentially trained ourselves to keep turning to that thing for that dopamine hit or that type of reward. And so, now that we know about neuroplasticity and that the brain can change, some of these addictions, I think, can be viewed more as a learned behavior or a learned habit that can be unlearned over time, especially like with the Sinclair method and what naltrexone is doing. You're doing the behavior, you're drinking, but you're not getting the same level of reward. It's basically interrupting that cycle that's been reinforcing the addiction. And this medication has actually been shown to work for other type of behavioral addictions as well, like gambling, compulsive sex disorders, binge eating. So imagine you do the behavior, but it's not flooding you with all of that reward anymore. And so your brain learns, hey, like I'm doing the behavior, but I'm not getting the same reward. It starts to look at the substance, like alcohol, differently. And so, I kind of think it's almost like a limiting belief for someone to say, I just have an addictive personality, because we're not stuck with where we are. And I think that perhaps we don't realize that addictions are learned behaviors and we just learn them by repeating them. And if people can just understand that, hey, if I have more structure with these things that are potentially addictive, like if we're scrolling on social media, but we do it for 15 minutes a day, it's probably not going to become an issue. Or if we do it a few times a week, same with drinking. If we drink once or twice a week and have a couple drinks, it's not probably going to become an addictive issue. It's when we repeatedly turn to it and kind of teach our brain that, hey, you can get this quick reward from this thing over here. And so I think to avoid addictions, for people to be aware, it's like not seeking out those things that give us this quick hit of dopamine or reward. It's how can we seek out pleasures that are more of a slow release of reward, like eating delicious balanced food or exercising or connecting with people or, the million and one things in life that are pleasurable, but, not putting us at risk for addiction. And then if we are doing things that are potentially addictive, to try to do it in moderation, like the slogan, drink responsibly. Like, it's funny, but it's kind of true. But at the same time, it's like, I think we don't realize, how risky alcohol, really is and how addictive it could potentially be. But I hope that answers your question.
I know you absolutely did. With naltrexone, did David Sinclair try this on other addictions? You mentioned, gambling or social media, which obviously in the 90s wasn't much of a thing. Was this tested on other sort of addictive type of behaviors?
It has been, and David Sinclair hasn't been the only one to research this, so others have researched it since. And I think even when he was researching it in the 90s, it had been used for food or gambling. I'd have to look at the dates of the studies, but there are research papers on naltrexone for binge eating, for marijuana use disorder, for compulsive sex addiction, for gambling. It was originally used for opioid addiction because it sits on the opioid receptors in the brain. It's kind of used differently for that, not in the same way like you do the behavior on naltrexone. It's more to prevent people from using opioids, because if you have naltrexone on board and you use an opioid, you won't get any of the effects from it. It just blocks the opioid. So it was used for those things. There's other ones I'm thinking of. Yeah, that's all that comes to mind right now. But essentially, behavioral addictions, several of them. I even have a client who had a compulsive shopping disorder on social media, TikTok and stuff, and she was using naltrexone and found that it quenched her desire to have that compulsive shopping behavior. I have a testimony of another person who used naltrexone for alcohol and was surprised that his compulsive sex disorder also went away on the naltrexones. Yeah, it can be used for a lot of addictions. It's primarily been researched most for alcohol, but it's been researched for other things as well.
Where I grew up, I used to deal cards in casinos, and you would see these people come in, and when they were on a winning streak, they were playing like the high stakes tables, and then they'd be coming back the next day after they lost, try to play the $5 tables, and just they have to keep feeding that urge. And it's unfortunate to watch that happen. But when someone comes to you at Thrive directly, how do you start to work with them?
Yeah, so step one, if someone is interested in the Sinclair method, is to get a prescription to the medication naltrexone. And like I said, it's generic, so it's really, really cheap. You can get it from your doctor. Technically, any doctor can prescribe it, but the challenge is this treatment is just so under the radar that half the time I hear from people, and this was my experience as well, doctors won't prescribe it. They're just like, oh, I don't know about, your general doctor doesn't feel comfortable treating addiction because they didn't get trained in that. So they kind of tell people to go to rehabs or AA, which they're not really using this medication in that way because it's a very much like abstinence-based system, which, I think a lot of people are drawn to the Sinclair method because it doesn't require abstinence. One of our therapists says, drinking's not the problem. It's the excessive drinking that's the problem. And so people, I think a lot of Americans, like I think I mentioned, 1 in 3 Americans drinks too much, according to the CDC. And so a lot of people are in this place where they have this unhealthy relationship with alcohol, but they're not an alcoholic. They don't identify as an alcoholic. They've got their life together, but this is kind of like the thorn in their side. And so this treatment really meets someone where they're at and helps them with their goals, whether that's moderation or quitting. So with us, the first step is to get the medication. We work with doctors in all 50 states, but people can also talk to their doctor about it. Just be aware they might not know about it and might not prescribe it. And then essentially someone starts doing the protocol, and it's a longer term treatment. We typically tell people to give it a full year to see results. It doesn't mean nothing is happening throughout that year. In fact, for a lot of people, their lives are changing. Their relationship with alcohol is changing in a really big way. But typically the results of this treatment are gradual. Like you're thinking about alcohol a little less, you're drinking a little less, hey, you're having more alcohol-free days. And those just build and build because the more you repeatedly do the behavior and you repeatedly don't get the reward, the brain gradually unlearns alcohol as this like go-to reward. And one example I'll give that I tell people is like, I used to like worship alcohol. Like I would salivate at like the thought of wine. I would drink it every day, drink it a lot every day. And by the end of the treatment for me, like I tell people a glass of wine was equivalent to like an iced tea. Yeah, I'll have an iced tea. Maybe I'll have 2, but I'm not going to like dream about an iced tea and binge drink iced tea, It was like, nah, it's fine. Yeah, 1 or 2 and I'm done, So it really corrects that use disorder in the brain and, takes alcohol down to a place where it's equivalent to other normal, rewards in life. So step 1 is getting the medication and starting on the protocol. Most people we encourage them to drink like usual, just incorporate in the medication following the protocol. And then as they progress through the treatment, we're helping them change habits around drinking. A lot of people, when they start on this medication, they start to see more clearly how much their drinking is done out of habit. They'll be like, I feel naltrexone working. I don't really have a craving or an urge to drink, but I'm doing it anyway because I'm bored or I'm stressed or it's what I do every night. And so our program and what we do working with people is really helping them with like the other 50% of it, with the behavioral habit change and all of that, and helping them get to a place where they have their ideal relationship with alcohol, whatever that means to them. And I think that's something that's so empowering about this treatment as well. You don't have to identify as an alcoholic. Again, this is more of a learned behavior, just like we can gain 20 pounds because our habits have been unhealthy for a while. It's like, okay, we're not going to put a shameful label on you and condemn you for that. It's like, you've just learned this behavior, and guess what? You can actually unlearn it. And most people within a year on the treatment, they're doing so much better, and they just kind of move on with their life. It's not like traditional treatment where it's like, oh, I've got to go to meetings, I've got to remind myself that I'm an alcoholic, and it completely flips the current treatment for alcohol dependence on its head. It's quite empowering, the protocol.
I was going to ask you about stress because I would imagine there's a good percentage of people that are drinking out of maybe just a stress relief. And is it fair to say they're seeing better focus and clarity a year into this program?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a process. If we've been turning to alcohol, as a stress response, we had a chaotic day, like alcohol's our kind of thing to look forward to and soothe us at the end of the evening. When you're doing that with naltrexone, what happens for a lot of people is, so they repeatedly drink on naltrexone. Let's say for the first few months, they're stressed, so they take naltrexone and drink. They're stressed, they take naltrexone and drink. What starts to happen is it feels like alcohol is not meeting the need in the way that it did before because it's not as rewarding. It's not as pleasurable. And so it almost forces us to look to healthier ways to cope with stress, because life is still going to be stressful and difficult, albeit alcohol definitely fuels that flame or whatever. But because they don't have that desire to drink as much, it becomes possible to think, okay, I don't really feel like drinking tonight. I had a crappy day, but I don't feel like drinking. It just doesn't sound good. What else can I do to relieve the stress? And I think for me, I tried to quit drinking. I tried to moderate for years before learning about this treatment. And my challenge was always that craving was there. It was so easy to justify drinking because the urge for a drink was so overwhelming. I'd be wake up in the morning, okay, I'm not going to drink today. And then 5 o'clock would roll around. I'd be like, screw it. I just need a drink. And that it was so hard to get beyond that craving. Logically, I knew I shouldn't be drinking to cope with stress, but the compulsion to do it was just beyond the logic and reason. And so as we progress on the treatment, that desire is just down, and we're just like, okay, I don't really feel like drinking, so now what? And so we gradually learn other coping skills, and alcohol just takes up a smaller and smaller part in our lives. But I'm not here to be like, oh cool, this pill's going to cure you of your alcohol addiction. Far from it, because what we say is you have to meet the medicine halfway. It's going to help you quiet the urge and desire and give you more control, but we've got to rebuild a life apart from whatever toxic relationship we've had with alcohol. And that's a process. But what's really empowering is that it's quite doable, especially when you're not just obsessing on drinking alcohol every day.
Absolutely. I mean, do you feel that a lot of people that you work with are inadvertently prioritizing health? Okay, I don't have the urge anymore, but maybe I'm still stressed, so I'm going to work out, or I'm going to whatever it might be to sort of have that positive effect on their health from all the heavy drinking they've been doing?
Yeah, I would say it's interesting. Most people in our program, we ask them what's your reason for making this change? And most people have health on that list. And as a society, I think sometimes we view an alcoholic, we view alcohol addiction as black or white. You're either an alcoholic or you're not. And that's hard for a lot of us because we're not that person under the bridge drinking out of a brown paper bag, homeless, that's not who we are. So where do we fit? Are we an alcoholic or are we not? And I think the majority of people exist on this spectrum. The medical community calls it alcohol use disorder, mild, moderate, or severe. And so for a lot of people, I would say 99.9% of the people I work with, I look at them and you would never know that they struggle with alcohol. So many people are silently and secretly struggling. I mean, I work with health coaches, yoga teachers, lawyers, people in finance, entrepreneurs, parents. It does not discriminate. But again, as a society, it's you're either an alcoholic or you're not. And so I think it keeps people stuck longer because they believe, okay, the only option is to go to rehab or AA, identify as an alcoholic, and never touch it again. And the truth is, with this neuroscience-based treatment that's been around since the 90s, you can do it privately from home. You don't have to put a label on yourself. You can just secretly, some people do this, they don't tell anyone they're doing it, but you can do it from home discreetly and fix your relationship with alcohol. And for a lot of people, this has just been the thorn in their side, where it's like, I have these ambitions, I have these goals, whether health or career or family or otherwise, and they can actually pursue them when the fog of the alcohol dependence lifts. They're not hungover anymore, they're not dreaming about that 5 o'clock drink anymore. It just becomes, one word people use a lot is they become indifferent toward alcohol, or it becomes unimportant, where sure, I might have a glass of champagne or two at a wedding, but it's not like I'm getting wasted and, just focused on the bar the whole time. It's like I'm actually focused on the wedding and talking to people, and the alcohol is more like an accessory and not this, the main event, if you will.
Yeah, and are you having people track what their habits are each day over the year? Is that something that you do, or is it kind of, look, we're going to start you on this medication and you're not going to feel it right away, so there's really no reason to track anything right away, but you'll start to feel that indifference kick in sometime in that 12 months or not too far after?
Yeah, we definitely encourage people to start tracking. Kind of the first thing we encourage them to track is just their drinking, because a lot of us, maybe we have an idea of how much we're drinking, but it's not something we're consciously aware of. Maybe we drink to turn off our brain, so we're not going to be thinking about, okay, how much am I drinking, and logging that. So one of the first things we have them track is their drinking, just to objectively notice how much am I drinking, and have that number. It's especially helpful if they do that before they start the treatment protocol. But once they start on the protocol, continuing to track that, and I will say some people notice a difference right away. Like they'll start the medication and their drinking is down 50% in the first month. Not everyone has that type of quick response. I didn't. It was more gradual. Some people have that response and then their drinking goes back up and then it goes back down again. That's why it's a long-term treatment, because alcohol impacts so many different areas of our lives that, maybe, I know in my case, it's like by a couple months in, I could have control over my alcohol at home. I would have a glass or two of wine and not want more, but if I went out to the bar with friends, I would still get drunk, and I'm like, wait, what's going on? It was just a different environment, different triggers and things like that. But yeah, tracking is definitely a part of this protocol. We encourage them to track their craving, understanding the motivation and reason why they're drinking. What is the feeling or thought that happened before you went for this drink? And it's not to judge them or to condemn them, it's more just for curiosity and information gathering. So that kind of awareness around the drinking behavior is really what we focus on in phase 1 of the method. And then as people progress, we kind of break it into 3 different phases. Phase 2 is really focusing on setting goals to change habits. Like, okay, I'm a nightly drinker. I usually come home at 5 p.m. and open up that bottle of wine. Well, instead, I'm going to go for a walk first, and I'm not going to start drinking till 7 p.m. Or I'm going to cook dinner and have a meal, and then I'll have a glass of wine after that. It's really kind of, if you read any habit change book, it's how we kind of incorporate into our program as well. These small habits that are changed gradually over time, more about consistency with changing. Okay, what's one habit I'm going to change this week? I think I mentioned, but the final thing I'll say is a lot of people become aware of how much their drinking is done out of habit when they start this protocol, because the craving is quiet and they're like, why am I drinking? I don't even really want to, but I'm doing it anyway. Kind of like how we can eat a bag of chips while we're mindlessly watching TV, even though we're not hungry, we're just like doing it mindlessly. The same thing can happen with alcohol, and just a little bit of awareness and intention around, okay, I recognize this unconscious habit is playing out. I'm gonna, do this instead. That really helps the method work, especially someone is on it longer, because people can still follow the protocol to a T but drink out of habit. Like it happens, and it's just kind of a learning experience as people progress on the protocol. But for most people, the longer they're on it, the better and better it works, and the easier it becomes to, drink in moderation, have more alcohol-free days, and things like that.
And what was phase 3?
Yeah, sorry. Phase 3 is more heading toward the end goal of this treatment, which the clinical term is pharmacological extinction of the addiction, which essentially means the addictive pathways that have become hardwired in the brain through repetition of drinking essentially get reversed. The addiction gets unlearned. And phase 3 is really focusing on that kind of last part of it, where in that phase, a lot of people, they're not really drinking very much. Most of their days are alcohol free throughout the week. If and when they're drinking in moderation, and it's not like they have to consciously change habits and be mindful and log their drinking. It's just starting to be more of an effortless thing. And that's kind of an indicator of phase 3. And for some people, I ended up quitting drinking through this treatment after I reached the extinction point, just because I became so uninterested in alcohol. I didn't even plan to quit drinking. I just kind of stopped, and I had my last drink and then I never drank again. But what's cool about this treatment is if I wanted to, go to a wedding this weekend and have a glass of champagne, I absolutely can. I would just follow the protocol. The interest isn't there. So I don't. I'd rather have like a Coke or sparkling water or something. So phase 3 is this extinction point where the addiction has been reversed. And that's honestly what it feels like for me and for most people. It's like the addiction that was there driving our behavior for so long, it's just like it gets reversed. Like my brain feels like it was restored back to the place it was in before I ever had my first drink. And it's not like I have to try to not drink, or if I go to this place and they're drinking, it's going to bother me. It's just like non-existent, as if I never touched alcohol before. And the freedom that comes through that, because I was sober one time 6 months. That was the longest I made it before this treatment. And every day it was white-knuckled. I was forcing myself not to drink. I was like, don't watch this show because they've got alcohol in it. Don't go here because they're going to be drinking. And it's just like every day was, okay, just don't drink today. Just don't drink today. And I ended up relapsing, of course. But then through this treatment, it's like, it's literally effortless to simply not drink. It just doesn't occur to me. And I tell people I can drink as much as I want to following the protocol. I don't want to. But a lot of people, they reach the extinction point and they drink in moderation. We have one of our coaches, he drinks couple nights a week, couple beers, no big deal. And he was someone who was drinking 2 handles of whiskey alone in his basement every night. Every week he would drink 2 handles. And to go from that to having a couple beers here and there, it's just like the contrast is incredible.
That's night and day. I was going to ask you too, because a lot of people listening might have, maybe not themselves personally, but maybe a parent, maybe a spouse, a close friend. How do you recommend going about pitching this to them? Because people listening obviously are like, okay, I understand it. She's explaining it very eloquently and how it works and how it's, untraining the brain in this capacity. How do you think you approach that with someone without irritating them, sounding judgmental?
Yeah, it's a touchy subject, and I've worked over the years with a lot of loved ones who want their family member or their kids or their husband or wife to get better. And when someone's addicted to alcohol, just to say from that perspective briefly, again, whether we're aware of it or not, our brain is equating alcohol to a survival need. And that's why some people can get so defensive around it, because it's like you're suggesting you want to take away this thing that they unconsciously think they need for survival. And so the thought of never drinking again, for people on the spectrum of alcohol use disorder, wherever they are, for a lot of people, the thought of never drinking again is terrifying, because again, their brain thinks, I need this to survive. Imagine if someone tried to take away your favorite food and you could never have it for the rest of your life. It's just like, what? No, get away. This is fine. So that's kind of the state of the brain when someone has an addiction to alcohol. But there's several great resources to kind of dip your toe in the water and introduce this to people. How I learned about it, that TEDx talk, that is still out there. It's a 15-minute talk, and she tells her story and talks about the treatment. It's called How I Overcame Alcoholism by Claudia Christian. It's on YouTube. I think it has over 5 million views by now, but that's a great little introduction to the treatment. There's also a documentary about it called One Little Pill that also dives into the protocol. I think you can get it on YouTube or Amazon. I think there's a website for it. There's lots of different ways to watch it. And there's just a lot of great content online about it. I mean, I've been putting out videos on YouTube since 2017. I've got success stories, interviews with experts and things like that. So short form, long form content. But I think those are kind of some nice ways to introduce it to people. There's also a book about the protocol called The Cure for Alcoholism by Dr. Roy Escapa. That's been around, I think, for over 20 years now. It's an easy read, but it does dive into the science behind it and how and why it works, and a better understanding of what is alcohol addiction. Is it a disease or a learned behavior? But that's something you can get on Audible or Amazon. So those are all, I think, really nice places to start. I also have some free resources on my website, alcoholrecovery.com, where people can, watch quick videos about it or download resources or understand who this treatment is for and is it right for them. But thankfully, this treatment's gaining more and more traction since I've been in this space since 2017. So if you search the Sinclair method, you'll even find articles on Psychology Today or Very Well Mind talk about this treatment. So dive into the research. There's more and more stuff out there about it, even though it's still very much under the radar.
And how do you think with younger people? What are you observing with the ones that just turned 21, probably drinking before that? But are you seeing that the younger kids are more prone to this, or because again, with the social media and all these sort of learned behaviors, that's sort of what concerns me. Like, what are you seeing a lot of younger people in your clinic?
Interestingly, not so much. There are some in their mid 20s that we're working with, but I would say the majority of people that we work with, men and women, it's probably equal, but a lot of them are people in their 60s, even 70s, who later in retirement, potentially, maybe they drank while they were working, but then it kind of got worse as they got older, or they're, not doing as much in life, so they have more free time, so they're drinking more. I would say maybe the 40 to 60 age range is the larger demographic we work with, but there are some younger individuals as well. I've seen some, recent articles come out that drinking is actually on the decline, that like less people are drinking and even younger people aren't drinking as much. I don't know if it's because we have social media and other things to become, learned behaviors of addiction or whatever, but I think if I had a message for younger people, something I wish I would have like been told more seriously when I was that age, like we're kind of told, oh, drink responsibly, and this is addictive. And I was just naive to the fact that I could become addicted to alcohol. I thought it was more of a logical choice, a conscious decision that this isn't going to happen to me. I thought you like had to be weak-minded or something to let an addiction happen to you. But for people to know that just by repeatedly drinking, and especially if you do it to excess, anybody can learn an alcohol use disorder. And so we're not immune, from it. And so really for people to be aware, if someone would have told me, you can drink, but always drink with meals. Don't have more than 2 or 3 drinks. Don't do it every day. Just these very practical ways to have more balance and like a healthier relationship with alcohol. I think if people approach it that way, it can help prevent the addiction from ever happening. Again, it's when it's repeated and when it's done to excess, it can happen within a year or less. I work with people who they didn't really have a problem before, but just with like COVID setting in and being at home and drinking at home, they developed an addiction very, very quickly. So whatever your age, it can happen at any age, but for people to be aware that you're not immune from this risk, it can happen to anyone, and just to have some guardrails around it, and it can prevent it from happening. And even if someone's even at the early stages, like I can feel this behavior's getting more out of my control, anybody at any stage can start on this treatment. It's not like you have to wait for it to get bad and then you do it. That's one of the great things about it. I actually worked with a client a few years ago. He went away to college in his first year. The binge drinking that happened at college caused him to develop this binge drinking type of relationship with alcohol, and he got started on this treatment and was able to go back to school and still have drinks with his friends and stuff, but it wasn't this like dangerous binge type drinking that he was doing before. And he was young. That was, he got it addressed early, which is like really nice as well for people to handle this early in life.
That's great takeaway. Is there anything you would say stress or does even like lack of sleep play into this at all, or is there any other like markers we should be looking for out there with people who are listening and saying, okay, I have a few drinks, but I don't feel like I have a problem? Is there anything else they should be paying attention to?
Yeah, I mean, lack of sleep can definitely increase cravings for alcohol or sugar or carbs in general. And even though I don't drink now, I notice if I don't sleep well, I want to eat a bunch of carbs and sugar that day. And I think when I was drinking, I was turning to the alcohol. So having good sleep, I think, is really important for that, but also just for our brain health in general. And so taking care of your basic needs, whether it's getting good rest, getting exercise, nourishing your body. I know for me, like, I had such an unhealthy lifestyle, but I would like work all day, work really hard. I was like a chronic people pleaser, and so I would end my day just completely exhausted, and alcohol was like my thing to run to cope with that, because I was just depleting myself and not taking care of my needs moment to moment throughout the day. So I think, taking care of your physical needs, as silly or as simple as that sounds, I think it can really help with our brain health and our cravings for alcohol. Sometimes when we work with people in our program, we'll recommend oftentimes that before they have a drink that they eat something, and that's very practical. But a lot of us who drink a lot, we drink on an empty stomach on purpose because we get the buzz more quickly. But a lot of people will say, maybe they're planning to drink, but they have this substantial meal of protein or a good healthy snack, and they're like, I don't really feel like drinking anymore. And that's a blood sugar issue. So being aware, if you have a craving for a drink, perhaps try having a snack beforehand to see if that can help quench the craving for alcohol. And again, recognizing that this can be a progressive, somewhat slippery slope. A lot of people don't, I would say most people, don't set out to become addicted to alcohol. What I hear a lot from people is like, I don't know, it was 2 glasses of wine after work and now it's 2 bottles. And I'm not sure like when I crossed that line. And so to be aware that this is a progressive thing that can be subtle and something that we're not even aware is happening to us. And then, once we realize it, it's kind of like we're in the thick of alcohol use disorder. So being aware that, if you can have more boundaries around your relationship with alcohol, if you want to prevent this from happening, I would just say, like I discussed, to not do it every day, to do it in moderation, have it with meals, and things like that, because it can become this just thing that we turn to more and more, and before we know it, we're like, okay, my tolerance is up, now I need 2 bottles of wine when before I had 2 glasses, and I'm doing it every day. And again, if that's where you find yourself today, it's not because you're a bad person, it's not because you lack discipline or willpower, or it's a reflection of who you are. It's just this behavior has changed your brain, and it can be reversed back. Your brain can change back, especially through the Sinclair method treatment. I haven't seen any other method that's as effective as this treatment. I've seen it change lives of people of all backgrounds, all types of drinking.
Like I said, I was very excited to talk to you because I've never heard of this, and maybe I've read like in passing, but never really dove into exactly what it meant and who David Sinclair was and how it's, again, growing and becoming more prevalent in just how people are dealing with alcohol use. Maybe when I was little, my dad did me a favor. He let me try a beer when I was little, not little, but 14 or 15 or something like that, because I kept asking it. It to me was the worst thing I've ever drank, and to this day I don't have any urge or taste for alcohol. I've had alcohol, but it's just not my thing. I just have no interest in it whatsoever. So I don't know if that helped at all, but that's like a vivid memory I can think of from decades ago, just that taste, and just never wanted to have it again.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very, very fortunate, I think. I mean, yeah, I think for most of it, I hated the way alcohol tasted when I first learned about it. But kind of again, back to your question for like younger people, one of the reasons I became addicted to alcohol when I did had so much to do with the peer pressure that I was around and the people I was hanging around with. Like, they say the 5 people you hang around with shapes your behaviors or something, but that is so true. And I didn't realize it was happening at the time. Yes, I was an adult and I was making my own decisions, so I take full responsibility. But looking back, I can see that just by the people I associated with, it made me see alcohol as cool and something that I should do on a regular basis. And it made binge drinking kind of glorified. And that's really where I fell into the addiction. Because when I was in my teenage years, I would experiment like a lot of American kids do and sneak alcohol, but it wasn't an issue. It was like I'd do it every once in a while and didn't care to do it again. But it quickly, after I turned 21, turned into this, compulsive behavior. And I think a lot of it had to do with the people I was around. So that's something to be aware of as well. If you're hanging around people that are using alcohol or other substances to excess, odds are it's going to happen to you as well. And to just be careful about that.
One final thing I'll ask, are there any side effects? I probably should have asked you this earlier.
No, really good question. So naltrexone is a pretty benign medication. It's not addictive or habit forming. Sometimes people say in my comments like, oh, you're just replacing one addiction for another. But anyone who's taken naltrexone knows it's not addictive, and you can Google it and figure that out. The side effects that people have, and the research shows this is what I've seen in practice as well, typically they occur in the beginning, but they go away within a week or two. And the most common side effects are stomach issues like upset stomach or nausea. Some people find that it makes them sleepy. Some people find that it makes it hard to sleep. And some people report just kind of like a brain fog type feeling. But typically when we work, like the doctors we work with, they work with people on dosing. So they start them at a lower dose and gradually work up, letting their body acclimate. And for most people, those side effects go away within a week or two. just my experience anecdotally, I started it, my doctor had me start at a lower dose, and I was a little bit out of it and tired. My stomach was a little upset, but within the first week, those were gone. I think after like the third time I took it. And then as I was on the treatment, I would have to write down that I took the medication because I would forget sometimes. I was like, did I take it? Did I not? Because there were just zero side effects to it. So, yeah, that's the 101 of the side effects.
And you're connecting them with a doctor, so it's not like they're just taking it at will. They're with their own guidance. They're being guided by a medical professional.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm not a doctor, but we work with doctors who specialize in the treatment, and they'll do like a full evaluation and make sure someone's a candidate for this medication and walk through all of that as well.
Yeah, and for people who are listening, that you said you work in all 50 states. How does someone get in touch with you and learn more about working with you and your other services?
Yeah, so they can just head to our website, thrivealcoholrecovery.com. Tons of information on there. They can also contact us through email or phone or text. Typically, if someone joins the program, we refer them to one of the doctors that we work with in their state. It's all done online, which makes it super convenient. It can be done discreetly and anonymously. People can choose, what their name is in the program or what type of photo they share, if they share a photo, like a profile photo. So, some people in our program, they don't use their real name and they just kind of do this under the radar, and, more power to them. Most people who have this issue, they don't want people to know that they have the issue. And so I think one of the cool things about this treatment is you can do it online, you can do it discreetly. You don't have to interrupt your life. You don't have to tell anybody that you're doing it. And so it's something, you can start without it being a big fuss. I had a call the other day with a woman who was asking about our program for her son, and he has a child, he has another one on the way, he's the provider at home, and she's like, I don't see how we could go to rehab. And I'm like, that's a great question. Like, he's, got to be there for his family. And again, back to the stat I shared earlier, it's like most people who go to rehab end up relapsing within 6 months again. So it's like you go to this treatment, maybe you quit drinking and detox for 30 days, but your brain is still addicted when you get out. And it's this fight to not drink. And so to have a treatment that fixes that root issue of the addiction is just incredible.
Yeah, and I'll make sure thrivealcoholrecovery.com is in the show notes for people that want to connect with you. If you can connect with someone like Katie and your team over there at Thrive, for you or someone, thrivealcoholrecovery.com would be the place to go. Again, that'll be in the show notes. And thank you again for your time, Katie.
Yeah, it was such a treat to come on with you. Thank you for your excellent questions. And I hope this is helpful, even just to one person. This treatment has changed so many people's lives. So I hope it helps people.